Hey everyone, and welcome to the deep dive. We're going across borders today.
Literally.
Yeah, literally, to compare and contrast entrepreneurship and cooperatives in two places that might seem worlds apart.
We got Sweden and Tanzania.
Our guide for this journey is going to be this super interesting academic book titled Beyond Borders: Entrepreneurship, Cooperatives, and Education in Sweden and Tanzania.
And what I think is so cool about this book is that it's actually the product of a research partnership
Oh, really?
between Södertörn University in Stockholm and
Right.
Moshi Cooperative University in Tanzania.
So we've got that global perspective already baked in.
Absolutely.
I love it. Okay, so let's jump right in. The book dives into this big question. How do we build economic systems that generate lasting growth? And why do some places thrive while others just, they struggle?
Right.
We always hear about, land, labor, capital, technology,
Yeah.
all those classic economic theories, but
They seem so abstract.
they really don't explain how growth actually happens, like on the ground, in real life.
Yeah, you're right to understand the real complexities of economies. We've got to go beyond just simple supply and demand.
Okay, so beyond the basics.
Yeah, one crucial factor is something called transaction costs.
Okay.
Firms exist because sometimes it's just more efficient to coordinate things internally rather than constantly making deals out on the open market.
So it's like companies streamline those interactions. They make
Yep.
things smoother.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
that makes sense. But now I'm thinking about huge corporations.
You're right.
Where do entrepreneurs even fit into all of this?
Great question. This is where we bring in Joseph Schumpeter. He's this really influential economist who introduced the concept of creative destruction.
Ooh, creative destruction. That sounds intense.
Schumpeter basically said that entrepreneurs are the drivers of economic progress.
Okay.
They shake things up. They find new ways to recombine existing resources.
I love that. Finding new ways to use what we already have.
Yeah, he has this famous quote. He said, "The entrepreneur creates something new by recombining existing resources."
It's like you're taking familiar ingredients and making a brand new dish.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got this new dish. What happens next?
So this innovation, it creates these clusters of development around new products or technologies.
Okay.
But here's where the destruction comes in.
Uh-oh.
As new things emerge, the old technologies and the old industries, they kind of fade away.
It's like survival of the fittest, but in the business world?
Right. It's this constant cycle of renewal.
Okay, so like how the internet basically replaced video rental stores and those huge sets of encyclopedias.
Precisely.
Wow. Okay, so now I'm thinking, who gets to decide who is and isn't an entrepreneur?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
Defining entrepreneur is a whole debate.
Really?
Some people say it's all about being innovative. Other people focus on spotting profitable opportunities.
Okay.
Some emphasize making decisions in uncertain situations, while others see entrepreneurs as master coordinators.
So many different ways to look at it.
Yeah, there's no one-size-fits-all definition.
Okay, so earlier you mentioned the dark side of entrepreneurship.
Right.
What did you mean by that?
Well, think about it like this organized crime.
Okay.
They're kind of like entrepreneurs of the underworld.
Interesting.
They're finding creative ways to make a profit, even though it's illegal.
Oh, wow. So entrepreneurial energy isn't always a good thing?
It's a powerful force, but it can be used in different ways.
That's a little scary.
Okay.
Okay, so we have this framework for understanding entrepreneurs, but our book looks at two very different places,
Yeah.
Sweden and Tanzania.
Yeah.
So what did the research tell us about how entrepreneurship works in each country?
It's interesting how economic crises shaped both countries' paths.
Okay. Yeah.
So in Sweden, the early focus was on big corporations.
Makes sense.
But then you have the industrial crisis of the 1970s and later the financial crisis in the 1990s.
Things got tough.
Exactly. And that forced them to rethink things.
Okay.
They started to see how important small businesses and that entrepreneurial spirit were.
For resilience.
Yeah, for adapting to change.
Wow, so sometimes those tough times can actually lead to positive change.
Absolutely.
Interesting. Okay, so what about Tanzania?
Tanzania's got a different story. During their socialist era from 1967 to the mid-1980s, entrepreneurship wasn't really encouraged.
I see.
The government pretty much controlled most of the economic activity.
Okay, so not much room for individual initiative.
Not really. But then in the mid-80s, they started introducing liberalization policies.
Opening things up.
Exactly. And we saw a big jump in self-employment.
Interesting.
And research on entrepreneurship also started to take off.
So two totally different paths, but they both ended up recognizing how important entrepreneurship is.
That's right.
Okay.
Mhm.
But besides those historical differences, are there any practical differences in how things work for entrepreneurs in those two countries?
Absolutely. Sweden, with its strong social safety net and welfare state,
Yeah.
it's got this really strong support system for entrepreneurs. They have access to funding resources, all kinds of things.
Sounds like a good place to start a business.
It can be. Now, Tanzania is still working on building that kind of ecosystem.
I see.
So limited access to capital and infrastructure. Those are big hurdles they're dealing with.
That makes sense. Different starting points, different challenges.
Right.
But I want to talk about one specific group of entrepreneurs, women. What does the book say about women entrepreneurs in Sweden and Tanzania?
This is a crucial topic. The book highlights how much more attention is being paid to female entrepreneurship,
Okay.
especially in emerging economies like Tanzania.
That's great.
But there is this tension.
Okay.
Women are told to go for it, start businesses, but they often face these societal expectations and traditions that can hold them back.
So they're encouraged, but they don't always have the same opportunities.
Exactly.
What are some of the specific challenges that women entrepreneurs face?
Well, access to finance is a big one.
Okay.
Traditional lenders often have biases
Really?
that make it really hard for women to get the loans they need.
Just start or grow their businesses.
Then there's the lack of support networks. Women often don't have the same access to mentorships and networking opportunities.
Yeah, those are so important.
They are. And of course, there's the constant struggle of balancing family responsibilities with the demands of running a business.
It sounds like they have so much to juggle.
They do.
Oh.
The book also talks about how women's motivations for becoming entrepreneurs are really complex.
How so?
It goes beyond just needing the money or seeing an opportunity.
Okay.
The research actually identifies these pull, push, and combined factors as motivations.
Okay, break that down for me. What are some examples of pull and push factors?
A pull factor could be like a deep passion for a specific field,
Okay.
or this strong desire to create something meaningful.
Like they're drawn to entrepreneurship by their own dreams and goals.
Exactly. Now, a push factor might be like a lack of other job opportunities,
Makes sense.
or maybe they need to supplement their family's income.
So sometimes entrepreneurship is born out of necessity.
Right. And then you have the combined factors where women might be starting businesses while also raising a family or holding down another job.
So many different paths.
Yeah, it's really about recognizing all those different experiences and motivations.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about individual entrepreneurs and their journeys.
Mm-hmm.
Now I want to switch gears a bit and explore a different model. Cooperatives. What exactly are they, and how are they different from traditional businesses?
Cooperatives are all about collective power.
Okay.
The International Cooperative Alliance defines them as autonomous associations of persons united voluntarily to meet their common economic, social, and cultural needs and aspirations through a jointly owned and democratically controlled enterprise.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
Yeah, it is. But basically, it means people coming together to achieve shared goals.
I like that. So what are some of the core values that make cooperatives unique?
Cooperatives are built on this foundation of self-help, self-responsibility, democracy, equality, equity, and solidarity.
Those are some pretty strong values.
They are, and they operate according to 7 key principles.
7.
Okay. Voluntary and open membership, democratic member control, member economic participation,
Okay, I'm following.
autonomy and independence, education and training, cooperation among cooperatives, and concern for community.
So it's not just about making money, it's about benefiting the community.
Exactly. And one of the coolest things about cooperatives is this one member, one vote principle.
Okay, I've heard of that. How does that work?
In a corporation, your voting power usually depends on how many shares you own.
Right. The more money you put in, the more say you have.
Exactly. But in a cooperative, everyone has an equal say no matter how much they've contributed financially.
So it's truly democratic.
Exactly.
That's fascinating. But I imagine that creates some challenges, right?
You're right. That one member, one vote thing can sometimes discourage people from investing a lot of money.
Why put in more if you don't get more control?
That's called the problem of moral hazard.
Okay.
And then there's the potential for free riding.
What's that?
That's when people benefit from the cooperative without really contributing much themselves.
Oh, so like slackers in a group project?
Pretty much. It's a balancing act to make sure everyone contributes and benefits fairly.
I see. So you have to be careful.
Yeah. It's interesting how these cooperative values kind of connect with trends like collaborative consumption and social enterprises.
Right.
There's this growing interest in ethical and community-oriented business models.
Okay. Can you give me an example of a successful cooperative?
Sure. Let's look at Swedish dairy cooperatives like Arla.
I've heard of them.
They're a great example of a cooperative that's now a major player internationally.
Wow.
In Arla, the dairy farmers are the owners, and each farmer gets one vote no matter how big their farm is or how much milk they produce.
So even the small farms have an equal say.
Exactly. It makes sure the decisions benefit everyone, not just the big guys.
That's really cool. I like that. I heard that Arla combines cooperative ownership with corporate structures.
That's right. It's a really interesting model.
How does that work?
So they have this two-tiered structure. At the base, you've got the local dairy cooperatives, where the farmers make decisions about things like milk production and pricing.
Local control.
Exactly. And then these local cooperatives, they elect representatives to a central board,
Okay.
which manages Arla's overall strategy and its international operations.
So it's like a pyramid structure.
Kind of. It combines local control with the ability to compete on a global scale.
That's smart. Okay, I'm curious about the differences in how cooperatives developed in Sweden and Tanzania. Can you tell us about that?
Their paths were definitely different, reflecting their different histories and economies.
Okay.
In Sweden, cooperatives have had this long, stable history. They've been important in agriculture, insurance, and retail.
So they're well established.
Yeah, the co-op movement, for example, has been a major force in Swedish retail for over a century.
Wow, okay. And what about Tanzania?
Tanzania's cooperative history is really intertwined with its colonial past and then the socialist policies after independence.
Interesting.
During the colonial period, agricultural cooperatives were really common,
What were they focused on?
mostly on marketing crops, like coffee and cotton.
So it was about helping small-scale farmers get their products to market.
Exactly.
Okay.
But then, in the 1960s, the socialist government started to exert more control over cooperatives.
So their independence was limited.
Yeah, and that actually ended up making them less effective.
Interesting. So it seems like too much government control can be a bad thing for cooperatives.
It can stifle their growth and their ability to respond to the needs of their members.
So what happened after Tanzania moved away from socialism in the 1980s?
Well, there was a renewed focus on member ownership and control.
Okay.
But after years of government interference, the cooperative movement was kind of weakened.
Yeah.
And they were facing a much more competitive economic environment.
A lot of challenges.
Definitely. What were some of the key developments in the Tanzanian cooperative sector during this time of transition?
One major development was the emergence of savings and credit cooperative societies.
Oh, yeah. SICOs.
Yeah, these financial cooperatives became really important,
Especially in rural areas.
where people didn't have easy access to banks.
Exactly. They provided credit and other financial services to people who really needed them.
So they were filling a crucial gap.
Exactly. And they played a big role in supporting entrepreneurship and economic empowerment.
I can see how that would be especially important for women and marginalized communities.
Absolutely. They were giving people access to financial tools that they wouldn't have had otherwise.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So how do SACCOs actually work in practice? Are they like mini banks?
They are in some ways, but they're also very different.
Okay, how so?
Well, one key difference is that SACCOs are owned and run by their members.
Okay,
So the members have a say in how things are run.
it's like a democratic banking system,
Exactly. And this helps ensure that decisions are made with the community's needs in mind.
not just about maximizing profits.
Right. And that difference is also reflected in their lending practices.
Okay, how so?
SACCOs often offer loans at lower interest rates than traditional banks.
Good.
And they're more willing to work with borrowers who might not have perfect credit.
So they're more flexible and understanding?
Exactly. They're really focused on supporting their members and helping them succeed.
That's amazing. So we've been talking about cooperatives as being distinct from entrepreneurial ventures, but the book kind of challenges that idea, right?
Yeah, there's this misconception that cooperatives are somehow anti-entrepreneurial.
Like they're just about maintaining the status quo.
Right, but that's not really true. Cooperatives often need entrepreneurial thinking to adapt and meet the changing needs of their members.
So it's about finding creative solutions within a collaborative framework.
Exactly.
Okay, are there any examples of that kind of entrepreneurial spirit within cooperatives that stood out in the book?
Yeah, there were a couple of really interesting cases. One example from Tanzania is these horizontally integrated cooperatives.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that. What does that mean?
So it's where members belong to both AMCOS.
Agricultural Marketing Cooperative Societies.
You got it, and CESAs.
The savings and credit ones.
Exactly. So through this system, farmers can access both agricultural inputs and financial services.
It's like a one-stop shop for all their needs.
Exactly. It shows how different types of cooperatives can work together to support their members in a more holistic way.
That's pretty cool. Now, what about Sweden? Were there any interesting examples from there?
Yeah, the book tells the story of Björkcentralen.
Try saying that 3 times fast.
I know, right? It's a Stockholm-based dairy cooperative that later became part of Arla. It
Okay.
was founded in the early 1900s,
Wow.
and it quickly grew its market share.
How did they do that?
They were really innovative with their production techniques and marketing,
Okay.
and they had this strong commitment to their farmer owners.
So they were successful while also staying true to their cooperative principles.
Exactly. They're a great example of how cooperatives can be both entrepreneurial and competitive.
I'm really impressed by their story. It seems like they really challenged the traditional business model.
They did, and their success shows that cooperatives can achieve incredible things.
Yeah, they don't have to be small or limited in their scope.
Not at all. They can be major players in the economy while also promoting social good.
That's a powerful message. Well, we've covered a lot of ground already exploring entrepreneurship and the power of cooperatives in both Sweden and Tanzania.
We have.
Before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I'd love to hear your final thoughts. What's the big takeaway you want our listeners to ponder?
You know what's really fascinating is that both entrepreneurship and cooperatives offer potential solutions to some of the biggest challenges we face today.
Like what?
Things like sustainability, social responsibility, and economic inequality.
Big issues.
Yeah, and they each offer unique approaches to tackling these problems.
Are you saying that they could actually work together to create a better future?
I think they could. Imagine a world where entrepreneurs aren't just driven by profit, but also by a desire to make a positive impact.
Right.
And imagine cooperatives providing the structure to ensure that the benefits of that innovation are shared widely and fairly.
Okay. I'm starting to see how those pieces fit together. It's a hopeful vision.
It is, especially when we're bombarded with all this negative news about climate change, inequality, and political division.
It can feel overwhelming sometimes.
It can, but I think both entrepreneurship and cooperatives offer a glimmer of hope.
I like that. How so?
Cooperatives, by their very nature, are all about cooperation, sustainability, and community well-being.
Okay.
They offer a model for economic activity that's rooted in values, not just profits.
So it's about shifting our focus from me to we.
Exactly. And imagine that same spirit of cooperation applied to the world of entrepreneurship.
Okay.
Entrepreneurs, with their drive to solve problems and create new solutions,
Yeah.
they could play a huge role in developing sustainable technologies, promoting social enterprises, and creating businesses that prioritize social impact alongside profit.
It's like redefining what it means to be successful in business.
Exactly. And I think this vision is gaining traction.
Really?
Yeah, we're seeing growing interest in impact, investing, conscious capitalism, and the B Corporation movement.
All of those align with cooperative values.
They do, and I believe cooperatives have a crucial role to play in this new paradigm.
How so?
They provide a proven model for building businesses that are both economically viable and socially responsible.
Okay.
They can be a source of inspiration and a practical framework for a new generation of entrepreneurs who want to create a more just and sustainable world.
It's a really inspiring vision. It gives me hope. Okay, but let's bring it back to the book for a moment. Were there any other interesting insights that came out of the research on cooperatives in Sweden and Tanzania?
One thing that really stood out was how resilient cooperatives have been.
In what way?
Well, despite the rise of globalization and the dominance of big corporations,
Right.
cooperatives have continued to thrive in both Sweden and Tanzania.
So they're not going away.
Not at all.
Yeah.
They've adapted and proven their relevance in the modern world.
That's really interesting. Why do you think they've been so resilient?
I think there are a few reasons. First, cooperatives benefit from a strong sense of loyalty among their members.
Huh.
People are more likely to support a business that they have a stake in and that aligns with their values.
It's about shared ownership and community.
Exactly. Second, cooperatives are often deeply rooted in their local communities.
Right.
That gives them a strong sense of connection, and it can be a real advantage in a world where people are looking for authentic and local experiences.
People want to support businesses that are part of their community.
That's right. And third, cooperatives have been remarkably adaptable.
How so?
They've evolved to meet the changing needs of their members and the demands of the market.
So they're not stuck in the past.
Not at all. They're constantly innovating and finding ways to stay relevant.
Like Arla with its hybrid model.
Exactly. They found a way to balance their traditional cooperative structure with the need to compete on a global scale.
It's impressive how they've managed to do that.
Uh-huh.
So it seems like cooperatives have a lot to offer.
They do, and they're a reminder that there are different ways to do business.
Ways that can benefit both individuals and the community as a whole.
Yep.
This has been such a thought-provoking conversation.
It has.
I feel like I have a much better understanding of entrepreneurship and cooperatives now. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I'm curious about something. We've been talking about how these models could help create a more equitable and sustainable future.
Right.
But are there any potential downsides or limitations that we need to be aware of?
That's a really important question. No model is perfect, and both entrepreneurship and cooperatives have their own challenges.
Okay, let's start with entrepreneurship.
Mm.
What are some of the potential downsides?
Well, one challenge is that the drive for innovation and growth can sometimes come at the expense of social and environmental considerations.
So it's that classic tension between profit and purpose.
Exactly. Another potential downside is that the entrepreneurial world can be really competitive.
Yeah.
There's this focus on individual achievement that can lead to a winner-take-all mentality.
It's like that saying, for every winner, there are 100 losers.
Yeah, and that competitive pressure can sometimes lead to ethical compromises, exploitation of workers, or a disregard for the environment.
That's a sobering thought.
Yeah,
It's a reminder that entrepreneurial energy needs to be directed in a responsible way.
absolutely. Now, when it comes to cooperatives, one of the key challenges is maintaining member engagement
Okay.
and ensuring effective governance.
So making sure that people are actively involved and that decisions are made democratically.
Exactly. Another challenge is attracting and retaining talented managers and leaders.
Who are committed to the cooperative model.
Right. It can be tough to compete with the salaries and benefits offered by traditional corporations.
That makes sense. And are there any other challenges?
Well, cooperatives can sometimes struggle to adapt quickly to changes in the market.
Especially when they're up against big, more agile companies.
Yeah, it's that classic balancing act between democracy and efficiency.
It's a tough one.
Yeah.
But even with those challenges, I think both entrepreneurship and cooperatives have a lot to offer.
I agree.
They represent different approaches to achieving similar goals.
Right. They both have the potential to create a more just and sustainable world.
I like that. It's not about choosing one over the other. It's about finding ways to make them work together.
Exactly. And I think that's where the real excitement lies, in finding those creative solutions that blend the best of both worlds.
Well, this conversation has given me a lot to think about. What was the most surprising or intriguing thing you learned from diving into this book?
You know, what really struck me was how interconnected entrepreneurship and cooperatives are.
Even though they seem so different on the surface.
Exactly. They're not mutually exclusive. They can actually complement and reinforce each other.
That's a really interesting perspective. It challenges the way we usually think about individual initiative versus collective action.
It does, and it opens up a whole new set of possibilities for creating hybrid models.
Like what?
Imagine entrepreneurs who are inspired by cooperative values,
Okay.
and cooperatives that embrace entrepreneurial thinking to drive innovation and impact.
So we're blurring the lines and creating something entirely new.
Exactly. And I think that's where the real potential lies, in breaking down those old categories and finding creative ways to harness the power of both entrepreneurship and cooperatives.
To create a better future.
Exactly.
That's a powerful message and a great place to leave our listeners with some food for thought. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today.
It's been my pleasure.
I've learned so much from this conversation,
You too.
and I know our listeners will too.
Yeah.
So until next time, keep those minds curious.
Absolutely. It's been my pleasure.
You know, listening to you, it strikes me how this all connects to something I've been thinking about lately.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
We're just bombarded with information all the time, you know.
Right.
Conflicting narratives, different perspectives.
It's a lot.
It's hard to know what to believe or even where to find reliable information these days.
You've hit on a really crucial point. It's not just the amount of information out there.
Right.
It's also all the competing narratives, the biases, the misinformation even.
Yeah, exactly. So how do we navigate all of that? How do we become more like savvy information consumers?
That's a great way to put it, like information detectives.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What are our tools for that kind of investigation?
Well, I think one of the most important things is diversification.
Okay.
Don't just rely on one news source or get stuck in a social media bubble.
Right.
Expose yourself to a range of perspectives, even those you might disagree with.
That's easier said than done, though, right?
It is. We tend to gravitate towards things that confirm what we already believe.
Yeah, totally. So how do we break out of that?
I think healthy skepticism is key.
Yeah.
especially when you encounter information that seems to perfectly align with your existing worldview.
Okay, so question everything.
Not everything, but be willing to challenge your own assumptions,
Hmm.
to be wrong sometimes.
To admit when we're wrong.
Exactly. That's
Yeah.
how we learn and grow.
So it's more about humility than ego?
Yeah, I think so. It's not about winning arguments.
Okay.
It's about engaging in respectful dialogue even when it's uncomfortable.
Even with people we disagree with.
Exactly, because
Yeah.
that's how we test our own ideas and understand different perspectives.
That makes sense.
Mm.
It's kind of like those entrepreneurs and cooperatives we've been discussing.
How so?
Well, they're all about solving problems, but they don't always agree on the best approach.
That's a great analogy.
And it's a good reminder that there are multiple ways to approach any challenge.
Right, and that sometimes the best solutions come from collaboration and compromise.
Exactly.
Mm.
Well, this deep dive has definitely given me a new appreciation for both approaches the individual innovator and the power of collective action.
And who knows, maybe they're not as different as we think.
Maybe there's some sweet spot in between.
Yeah, some kind of hybrid model that combines the best of both worlds.
Now, that's something I'd love to explore further.
Me too. It's a fascinating area with so much potential.
Well, on that note, I want to encourage our listeners, if any of this has sparked your curiosity,
Yeah,
definitely check out Beyond Borders, the book that inspired this whole conversation.
it's a great read.
It really is. It's a fascinating look at how these models play out in such different contexts.
And it really makes you think about the possibilities.
It does. And whatever you do, keep asking questions, keep exploring, keep that curious spirit alive.
The world needs more curious minds.
Couldn't agree more. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. Until next time, keep those minds curious.
Absolutely.
Makes you wonder, with all these models and approaches,
Yeah,
what does it all mean for us as individuals,
right. How do we make sense of it all?
especially in our own lives and communities?
That's a big question.
It is. I mean, we've been talking about entrepreneurship and cooperatives,
Yeah,
but these concepts can feel kind of abstract.
I get that.
Okay.
So how do we actually apply these ideas in a practical way?
Exactly. Can we learn from both models?
I think we can. We can be inspired by the entrepreneurial spirit.
Okay, that drive to innovate and create.
Yeah, and we can also embrace the cooperative principles.
Those values of collaboration and community.
Exactly. Maybe it's about finding that balance.
Between individual initiative and collective action.
Right. Finding ways to work together to achieve common goals.
I love that idea. That's a really hopeful message, I think.
It is. It's about recognizing that we're all in this together.
And that we can achieve more when we work together.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you again for joining us on the deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
This has been such a fascinating conversation.
It really has.
I've learned so much, and I know our listeners have too.
I hope so.
So to everyone listening out there,
Yeah.
whether you're an aspiring entrepreneur, a seasoned cooperative member, or just someone who's curious about building a better world,
We hope this deep dive has given you some food for thought.
and inspired you to take action in your own communities.
Remember, every journey starts with a single step.
So don't be afraid to dream big,
Mm.
collaborate with others, and make a difference.
The future is ours to create.
And that's a wrap on the deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those minds curious.